I don't know, he reminds me of someone.
All right, so you would be counted, and then what would you do? You would go to work.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
We walked wherever we worked. We worked in Silsheim. We did not walk out of this camp to work. We used to carry stones back and forth. We actually worked almost 20 hours a day. Carrying stones, carrying garbage, carrying whatever.
Well, what would you carry the stones for?
I don't know, from place to place. They found things to do for us.
Just to keep you busy?
Busy.
Did you say that you'd worked in a factory as well?
Later. That was the time when the Russians were going after the Germans.
Okay.
And they came from Odessa.
Okay, so between...
The factory was brought there shortly before liberation.
I see.
Well, no, I don't know how short. They moved the factory from Odessa because the Russians started pushing them.
All right.
And then we became workers in that factory.
But before that time, all you did was this kind of meaningless work.
Meaningless work. There was a group of people that would sort clothes, for example, for the transports that were arriving day and night, day and night. When you go to Auschwitz someday, you're going to see the museum of things, the protheses, glasses, little bags with children's clothes. All of these things, they took, for example, our hair and sent it back to Germany to make mattresses. They took away the protheses and glasses to send to Germany. Some of it you find in Auschwitz, in the museum.
So what work did you do?
We worked in an anti-aircraft factory. They did powder. There was a powder room. If we stop for a second, I would like to give you the book so you see what I'm talking about.
No, well, but let's just talk about it.
Well, anyway, they had a powder room, and they created powder explosives there. And some of our girls worked there. Some of us worked at the tables, long tables, with parts that we put together or something like that to have the explosions or something. And I never remember names, but I remember the name of the Gestapo boss that would come in and look at no one. And his name was Schrepfer. I forget names of anybody, not this name. Mm-hmm. And we had a man that was in German they call it the Meister, the supervisor, the boss that taught us how. And one woman, her name was Fifi or something like that. She wasn't too bad. And we came in the morning. We worked God knows how many hours. We walked 5 kilometers from Birkenau to Auschwitz every morning, 5 kilometers back. And there were a lot of German prisoners there, all the prostitutes. One was political, and she was a beast of the world, Maria. She had a red sign, and the prostitutes had black sign.
What was the red, political?
Yeah. And the green, the black were prostitutes, the red was political, and the green was, I don't know what you call it, lesbians or something. But they were our bosses, and that political woman, Maria, I see her face, she was good looking too. Not good looking, but rough. Mm-hmm. She didn't stop beating until you bled.
Did she ever beat you?
Oh, yes. She
Why?
beat us. Oh, we walked too slow, we did that too slow, we didn't walk right, whatever.
And she beat you with
and
her?
Gestapo was right behind us, and if anyone fell, we didn't pick her up, she was gone.
Did you used to pick people up?
She didn't. The assessment would kill him.
But I mean, did you try to pick people up when they'd fall?
We always tried to pick them and pull them and stand them up.
When this Maria would beat you, just with her hands?
Yeah, or a stick, I don't
stick,
remember.
right. So you were working, what actually did you do? Did you do all different kinds of jobs, or did you mostly work on
It was an aircraft factory
Right, but I
in
mean your
Odessa.
particular job.
Well, we did, and there was a powder room that made explosives.
Right.
So obviously, at that time, I wasn't in the aircraft business. Now I am. Now I know a lot more about it. Obviously, they were making some parts, maybe to make explosives
Right.
be put into it, and explosions or whatever.
What I'm trying to
At that
understand
time, I
is,
wasn't so interested
Yeah.
in knowing all that.
did you always have the same job, or did they move you around? Did you?
Well, sometimes they put us from one table to another.
Okay.
And
What time would you get there in the morning? Do you remember that?
we got up to Tsay Lapel, 3 o'clock in the morning. We were counted, put in a line, and then we walked. Whenever we got there, we got there. It was 5 kilometers. And wooden shoes like they were in Holland. So we ended up in stilts, kind of, if the snow went up. They didn't make it easy for anyone. And if we fell down, they beat us. Or if they didn't move in that second, they killed them. We tried to keep our friends with us, I mean, as much as we could, one the other.
So for how long? I know it was hard to keep track of time. How long did you work like this?
Well, when the Russians started, liberation wasn't far back. But we did work, it seems, endless time, and I couldn't tell you how long.
So when were you aware that the Russians were changing the
When
war?
we heard, when we started running on the death march, that was the time when we were sure that they are gone too, the Russians.
So
and
how
the
did that happen? How did they start you on the death march?
As soon as the Russians started coming, they came into our barracks. Whoever couldn't get up to walk, they left them for dead, if they looked dead. And otherwise, if you looked half dead, they killed you. And if you got up, we had to start running. And we walked the death march. They killed thousands of us on the way. Therefore, they called it the death march. And that was the last march I did.
Now, what do you mean that was the last march? You didn't make
Well, that's the time, because it was close to liberation.
So
when we
marched...
started working in that. I will show you a book. One of my cousins worked in the powder room, and 3 other girls. They were hung because the Sonderkommandos, the Jews that were the Sonderkommandos, had to explode the crematories because they knew that the end is coming and they didn't want to leave signs. So we smuggled little bits of powder. The 3 girls that worked there, 3 or 4, 3 I think, put the powder into their whatever. Whatever we could, we took. And we delivered them to these people that were Sonderkommando, the Jews. And they exploded 2 crematories. And eventually they were killed for it. Then they found out that the girls from the powder room carried the powder. They didn't know that all of us helped. So they made a morning of no work, but watching them being hung. I want you to take those 2 books and read them and give them back to me. They're precious to me.
So these were your cousins?
One of them was my cousin. This
cousin.
one was brought to me now from Poland.
So you actually witnessed this execution?
Oh yes, we had to stand and witness. And one of the girls' sister was up looking down because at that time some of these people that worked for the factory were moved closer by. That was almost to the end. So we lived in buildings up top. And that girl looked down on her sister being hung. She started screaming. We had to keep her quiet because they would have hung her too. So we knew the end is coming.
Right. So
and
now
they
then
called
they
this
gather
later in the history books. You find that they called it the Death March.
Death March.
There
so
were
where
no
were they marching
outhouses
you?
You could go in. There was just a field, and with trees, what you call it, a part of the tall trees. It's not, what do you call them when they have trees?
You mean like orchards and forests?
A forest.
Okay.
So some of the people went to the forest, and if the assessment saw them there, because they couldn't take care of their biological needs. Mm-hmm. And you cannot walk and do all that, right?
How many, do you have a sense of how many people were marching? Thousands, hundreds?
Thousands.
Thousands.
That's why they call it the Death March.
Right. But now
Most of them were killed on the way.
Do you have any idea, did you have any idea of where you were going to?
No.
How long did you march?
God, we walked day and night. I don't remember how many days we dragged. I used to go in away from the thing. I went into a place that had chickens and things, mm-hmm. and I collected the frozen potatoes from the chickens so I could have something to eat. And there was an outhouse, and I went to this outhouse. And one day I knocked at one door on another place, and I spoke German, and I said, oh, would you be good enough to give me some water? I'm very thirsty, and I have to walk there. They gave me hot tea, and I walked away. And I took the frozen potatoes into my pocket. I worked many days and many nights, but I did.
Now, when you say that you walked away to ask, like, for you to take the potatoes and everything,
if I didn't see any assessment, I did.
You would dart away, but then you would rejoin the march.
Yes.
Why did you do that? Why
because
not?
they would go out and tell them maybe. I didn't know who's going to tell the assessor I'm there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I did it as fast as I could.
Then okay, so now you're marching along. Are you by yourself or with friends?
By myself. My sister-in-law was somewhere back of me. She couldn't catch up with me, mm-hmm. and I hoped that she would, which she did later. When I came to this little town and I heard that the wagons stand there, and I said, no, I'm not going there.
So you got to a point, what, you mean wagons, you mean like trains? Did they want to put you back on
The cattle
trains?
wagons again, because they wanted to go closer to the German border, mm-hmm. and then the French border was nearby. And I said, I'm never going to go into that cattle wagon.
So what did you do?
Well, I was, when I got close to this town, I stopped there. There were people watching. Most of them were Volksdeutsche.
Part German, part Polish.
And I walked there and stood among them. They didn't say anything.
Were you in a uniform?
I was not in the blue and gray uniform because they didn't have any more uniforms, and they were killing so many people every day. So they had a Sonderkommando that would check the clothes and things, and then they would throw to us all kinds of clothes. I wore a brown coat with red paint on it in the back. If somebody would turn me around, they would know who I am. So the people there stood about 10, 15 people, and I went among them. And they said nothing. I figured I'm taking a chance. My mother believed that destiny will take you down here or live or die. So I figured if I have to live, I will. Otherwise, I won't.
So you watched as they put the rest of the people who'd been, the survivors of the death march.
I was already at the end of the transport at that time. Mm-hmm. They saw all kinds of people go. And then the following morning, or that morning, they found some Jews frozen through the night because they were kneeling and frozen. And I stood among these people. And then there was a man that came along, a tall man, and he had a raincoat on top, a heavy coat. It was January. And my two left shoes were completely wet. And then I said to him, can you lend me this coat? I want to cover something. He says, nein, German. His mother's sick, and he came from a working camp, and he cannot give it to me. So I said, okay, whatever happens. Then he took a Mark 50 out of his pocket, German money, and he gave it to me. So I put it in my pocket, and I said, whatever God wants, that's going to happen. And my sister-in-law, that one that's still alive, that her husband was killed later, said to me, she came by, and she says, why are you standing here? I said, please come and stand with me. She says, no, they're going to kill you. I said, well, I'm not going to the wagons. She says, please come. I said, no, Zosha, I'm not going. So she threw me a package with a babushka and stockings in it. And then when I left, when I finally met her in France, she says, I heard a shot and I thought you're gone. Because I was the only Jewish person standing with those 15 people. They never said a word. And finally, there was an assessment coming along, looked around, and he said to me personally at the end, I stood, Gehören Sie dazu? Do you belong to this, march? I said, sind Sie verrückt? Just like that, I said, are you crazy? In German, I spoke German. I had a mother that spoke German. She believed that you have to be educated.
So then he just laughed or something?
He left. That was their last assessment on that particular group.
So those people that you were standing amongst, they
Didn't
let you
say a word.
They let you live,
Yeah.
literally.
And I walked into the village. Are you interested what happened?
Yes.
I walked into the village. It was dark. Snow up to here. My 2 left shoes got all wet. And I walked into one backyard that was a farm area.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the window and it was still black out. And I listened to the people and they spoke German. So I walked out again. And I walked into another place. And I didn't go to the building because it was dark, night. It was already night. I saw a little shack and I opened up the door. There were coal lying there. So I walked in, put my 2 shoes off, and I lie down on the coal and I fell asleep. I heard the rooster in the morning and church bells. I knew it's Sunday. So I got up, my shoes were stiff. I was cold, and I walked out, and there was an old man came out of that big house. Not high, big, like on a farm. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, who are you? I said, I hope you forgive me, but I am one of these marchers, and I went into your shack. And I think it's Sunday. He says, yes, it's Sunday. I spoke German, mm-hmm. Polish. He says, I said, I'm very cold. Can you give me some water to drink or whatever? He says, oh, wait here. He got in and brought me a cup of coffee and some piece of something. I knew it's Sunday. And then he came up and I said to him, I'm very cold. Can you let me in? He says, wait here. And he walked in and I heard some woman scream. And he said, shut up to her. And he came out and took me in after I had the coffee. Mm-hmm. And she screamed, they want to put us all in a concentration camp. You don't have to put these people in. You throw her out. He says, you shut up. Halt dein Mund, he said to her. So keep your mouth shut. And he put me into another room, and there was a pot-belly stove burning. Mm-hmm. And I took my 2 shoes off, and they got stiff from the heat. Mm. And I said to him, I have one more question, and I want you to do me one more favor. Can you get me needle and thread and scissors? I'd be very grateful. He says, wait here. He brought me all those things, and I took my coat off. Underneath, I had an apron, one-piece apron, like like a dress, kind of. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But if you put it here, that there is this looked out of the...
Yeah, like a pinafore, jumper.
I took this off and rolled it up. And underneath that, I had a woolen dress because the transports from Holland were coming so regularly that all of their clothes they gave us because they didn't have any more uniforms. Mm-hmm. Also, there was what did they call that? There's a group of people that sorted clothes. Right. Whatever was good for Germany, they shipped to Germany. And then the rest of it, we used to wear. Mm-hmm. So I sat down, cut my coat that much, took this piece, and put it from here down to cover the red paint. And all of a sudden I had three-quarter jacket and a dress, a black dress underneath, the woolen dress. And my shoes were brown, which was like the jacket.
So you look halfway respectable.
Right. And I rolled up the thing to throw it away. And I thanked the guy, and he was almost in tears, an old man. And I said, I'll never forget you. And I walked out. And I said, how do I get to the village? He says, you can hear the bells, and the farmers go to the church, go with them. And I did. And I made a mistake walking into church, because everybody turned their head and looked at me, because I wasn't like them. So I walked right out and started walking to Silesia. I knew where I'm going, to the man I got the milk from. So I started walking. There was a lot of bombing of the German towns at that time too. So German women and men and children were walking too, because their homes were bombed out. And I knew of the Jews. Some of them were frozen through the night, and then eventually they would go to those cattle wagons and come to the French border. Oh my God. So I walked along a German woman, and she was carrying a little bag, you know, straw bag, heavy. And I said, you know, in German, I'll help you. And we carried it, because I figured I have to walk 58 kilometers. Maybe I will. So I knew I had that £1.50, you know, of German money. Pfund, they said. And I was hoping that it'll get me to a place I'm going. However, I said to her, oh, I don't know when I get to this town, Myslovice, whether I can get a train to Katowice, whatever, the names of the German name. And she says, oh, don't worry, when we get there and you don't get the train, you can sleep with my family. Because I didn't look Jewish all of a sudden. I never did look much Jewish. And when we started walking, but strong, there were the Vlasov's army people. You know, the Russians were allies. And I always had red cheeks. I used to fight with my mother. I looked like a farmer girl. And she says, one day you're going to thank me for it. And I did. And they looked at me and they flirted with me. And I was afraid that they go after me. I said, my God, I just came out from hell and they think that they can see me like a human being. But I was scared. So I walked so many miles, and at night we got into this town. And she says, well, why don't you check whether you have a train? And I did have a train. So I waited for the train and got into the other town. I think.
Now, how did you pay for the train with your
I
mark?
had this Mark 50,
Right.
which was plenty for it.
Yeah.
You know, destiny made me live. I believe what my other said. And I finally ended up in a home of this person.
The man that you're...
He was married to a young woman, had children. And I walked in and I fainted dead away. When I woke up, there was a table full of food and I couldn't eat. And two women that were hiding in his friend's house came to see me. They came from a nearby town where I used to be. Sosnowiec was the next town. And from there, I was hiding there until the Russians came. And then there is a long story again.
About
I
what?
went, yes, but I traveled back to, where did I come from? That I was already in Katowice, but then I went back to the displaced persons camp.
Now the war is over at this point?
Well, I was hiding in his house until the Americans, the Russians first came.
So this would have been 1945 probably.
Something like that, yeah.
So then after the war was over, you stayed with this man. This was the same man whose...
No, right away after, I went to the displaced persons camp.
No, I mean between the time the war, before the war ended, you stayed with him
there.
until... Okay.
I did.
And then the war ended and you went to a displaced persons
Yes,
camp.
I fainted, and when I woke up, there was a table full of food
Right.
and all that. I couldn't.
Had you been ill during the war? I think you said did you have typhus during?
Yes.
When did you have typhus?
Oh, shortly after I came, all of us had.
Shortly after you came to the camp? So you were
After
sick?
a while,
You were sick in the
there
camp?
I had gangrene, I had typhus, I had dysentery, all of these sicknesses everybody had.
The gangrene you got from the frostbite, from cold? Okay. So after the war, after the liberation, then you went to the displaced persons camp where?
And Frankfurt was Salzheim. Salzheim.
Is in Germany.
Salzheim was in Germany, outside of Frankfurt. Outside.
Did you know yet if you had any family living?
No. But slowly people started traveling or listening, and I found out that I have, that my sister is in France. And she sent a French soldier later to walk the borders with me.
How did your sister find you?
I can't remember details, but people started traveling and knowing and hearing, and she found out. I think that my brother, the one that my sister-in-law was with me, my brother was liberated on the French border, that I did not want to go to the cattle wagons.
Oh, right, I see.
And she went, and she met her husband there.
So how long were you in the displaced persons camp?
I don't think I was there very long. Maybe 8 months or something like that.
And you regained your strength?
Huh?
You regained your strength?
Yes. I went to my sister's home to France. She sent for me
So you went.
a French
you went-
soldier
You went.
that she paid for.
Okay, so she sent a French soldier to help you go. Is it Salzheim? Is that the name of the?
Huh?
Did you? What was the name?
Salzheim.
Salzheim was the DP camp, and then from there you went with a French soldier.
Not very far. There was the Americans had their seat not far from this area. What was it? Heilenberg or something.
So you went with the French soldier to join your sister in France.
I went through borders, in Belgium and the German border, and in Belgium.
How did you travel?
On foot, until we came to a certain town that we got on a train to my sister.
Why did you have to travel on foot?
Because we still didn't know whether it's safe anyway. Other than that, because she took us through borders. I didn't have visas to go from one country to another. When I came to Belgium, I remember that we were close to where my sister lived, Pas-de-Calais. You know, where they have their, now the tunnel is
The channel,
made from
right,
there,
yeah.
the channel.
So you met your sister. Do you remember when you met your sister?
We came into Salzheim, to Lille.
Lille.
And then we came to where she lived.
Do you remember that actual moment of seeing her again?
Yes.
Can you describe it?
Oh, I cannot even tell you what I felt. But she went to pieces. She was hiding in the south of France. And she had come back and opened her home to everybody that was coming back. She was that kind of a woman. And it was a small town, Albertville. No, Albertville was another place.
Lille, you said.
Huh?
You said Lille before.
Lille was before her little town.
Near her little town.
At this moment, I can't remember.
That's okay.
Cynthia may remember. But I guess when I met her, she went to pieces too.
So you stayed with your sister then?
Yes, and then I had a brother in Lille, and they were all very generous. And I had a brother that was in the English Air Force, the one that just died 2 weeks ago.
The American Air Force?
No.
English Air Force?
Yes, because the ones that were in England, he studied. And all the Jewish boys, I told you that when Anders came to America, he became the president of Poland in exile. And he gave them the chance that the RAF trained them. And when I worked in this factory, my brother flew those missions to Frankfurt, through Frankfurt.